Hi, this is Matt Wood with Antique American Indian Art with another one of my Tuesday Talks. Today I brought out a couple pieces I wanted to show you. I brought a Navajo Germantown Chiefs blanket and a Navajo shoulder blanket that's done in a mochi pattern. I want to just describe a little bit about these two items because they reveal a few things about mid-19th to late 19th Navajo blankets. The larger piece right here with the red is the Germantown piece. Germantown is a term that we use for the wool that's used in this blanket. The wool was produced in Germantown, Pennsylvania, was shipped across the Santa Fe Rail, and it's distinguished by being a very fine yarn. It's a commercially produced yarn, and if you look right down into the yarn, you'll notice that it is a plied yarn, meaning if we took out a yarn and back twisted it, it would be composed of either 3 or 4 small plies to make the yarn. Most Navajo weavers from the late 19th century who purchased this yarn at the trading post would find it so fine that it didn't work well with a hand-spun warp thread. To begin their loom, they have to warp their loom. They have to decide, do they use expensive Germantown yarn to warp their loom? Homespun, which is fatter than Germantown and was unbalanced diameter-wise. What they usually chose was neither of those two. They went to a cotton string, which was thin and slick and smooth, small diameter that they would warp their loom with. So most of the Germantown woven pieces are woven on a cotton string foundation, which makes for a very smooth and even blanket, but makes for inherently a weak physical textile because cotton can rot and break down a lot more than wool can. So very few Germantowns that make it to today have survived in as good a condition as this one. So when we look at Germantowns, what we're going to be identifying is that it's going to be a plied yarn that's very thin, that's very fine, and that when we can find the pieces and we look at the ends and we look right back down to the warps, we'll notice that the warp strings are this white, and if we look at it real carefully, we'll notice that's going to be cotton string. So that's something to note from Germantown blankets. All right, a second blanket I want to show you is going to be known as a Navajo Mochi Serape. And this is a mid-19th century piece. It has the homespun field of natural carded gray, deep, dark, natural brown. They'll use rabbit brush on their homespun here. They'll use indigo blue dye here, which is a leaf mold dye. And interestingly, they have this purplish red tone, which has been identified as cochineal dye. Cochineal is a beetle that lives on beaver tail cactus that burrows its head into the cactus leaf and looks like a berry. And when you pull the beetle off and you smash it, it has this beautiful red color to it, which became a very important export out of Old Mexico. Behind gold, cochineal was the second most important export. The Spanish would get it. They would take it in their ships back to Spain, and from Spain to England, the English would weave cloth they called English beige or Spanish bayeta. They would dip the cloth in bolts of cochineal juice, turn it red, send the cloth back to Spain. The Spaniards would take it back to Mexico, and by pony caravan, it would make itself up into the southwest regions where the Navajo would get it by raid or trade. And they would unravel this cloth right back down to its yarn content and lay it into their Navajo loom. And that's how you got this red. Very interesting story and how the red came into this piece. Banded pieces, classic shoulder blanket. The central band here, when worn, would go right down your spine, would look magnificent, wrapping around like this. Even if you're an old and misshapen person, putting a blanket like this around you automatically gives you an idealized human form. It's rather regal, rather majestic. And so this is what they call a 19th century Navajo Mochi, Bayeta, and Indigo Serape. So I hope that that was interesting to you. I hope that you come visit our website. You can see this and many other beautiful weavings on AntiqueAmericanIndianArt.com. Thanks so much.